Hey everybody, movie reviewer next door here, and I don't know yet, but I get the feeling this video is going to be emotional because of my attachment to this film. And I know there are probably going to be some people who very much disagree with me on this film, but I do have my actual reasons. Today, I am reviewing the Premonition from 2007. I recently did watch another movie called Premonition from 2004, a Japanese film, which I thought was decent. That's about as high as I could say about that film. This is Premonition from 2007, starring Sandra Bullock, Julia McMahon, Nia Long, Kate Nelligan, Amber Valletta, and Peter Stormare. Now, the plot of Premonition, also directed by Menon Yapo. The plot of Premonition is a depressed housewife, Linda Hansen, played by Sandra Bullock, wakes up one day to find out that her husband has died in a car crash. She has a hard time getting over this fact, and then she goes to sleep that night, and the next day she wakes up to see that her husband is alive. And she's stuck in a kind of time loop where every day it goes back to before he dies and then after he dies. And she basically has to race against time to try and save her husband. Or at least find out what's happening. Now, this film, I love it. I'm just going to say right off the bat, I love this film. I will never understand the ratings people give it. I'll never understand why so many people hate it. I just never will. I think it is a very gripping watch, especially for people who have been through loss and have gone through the stages of grief like I have, and I will explain, especially when it's a family member. Now, this film, the whole point of it is like, oh, she's racing against time to see if she can find a way to prevent her husband from dying, try to save him. And yeah, it's a very gripping film. This isn't, it's obviously not an action movie. If it's more close to thriller or horror in a way. I do have a couple problems with the film, but they're problems that don't really take away from my enjoyment of the film. And this is a kind of hard film to watch. What I mean by that is, it is very much not a, whenever things happen in the film, it's not like for excitement's sake. It's more just dramatic, which is what it's trying to do. So I'm not mad. I'm not mad that it's very sad. But just before I get to the cast, the reason I hold this film so near and dear to me is because my father, about 11 years ago, it wasn't a car crash like it is in this film, but my father was sick. I've never been super clear on how and in what way, and he was getting better, and the night that he was supposed to come home, it was over the weekend at UNC Rex Hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina, and during the night, my mom and my grandparents, my grandparents on my dad's side, were at the hospital at his bedside, and the nurse over the weekends at that hospital, I don't know if about now, but back then they didn't have many doctors on call during weekends, and the nurse that was assigned to him gave him penicillin, which he was deathly allergic to, and he died there. He died soon after taking the penicillin because he wasn't in any way. I mean, how can you expect someone to pay attention? They're in the hospital and they're supposed to be taken care of. And he died there, and I've been fatherless for about 11 years now. Coming up on 12 this year. And not long ago would have been my father's 60th birthday. So, this is dedicated to him. And I know firsthand, I know I'm not the only person that has gone through this type of suffering. I'm not trying to minimize anybody else's. I'm just saying this film really spoke to me. The first time I saw it was with my mom, a couple years before my father died, and I knew I liked it back then, but it took me watching it again after his death to really understand. And I get the feeling, I'm not trying to minimize people's feelings about this film, but if you haven't experienced that grief, or can't put yourself in the shoes of someone who's gone through that grief, then I will say that you're possibly not understanding the film. And you don't understand what the film is going for. But before I get deeper in opinions like that, Sandra Bullock as Linda Hansen, she does a fantastic job. She really has to balance a lot of emotions, a lot of very deep emotions she has to go from each day. This film is apparently shot in order, sequential order, as in, like, as the film plays out, it was filmed in that way. And that has to be hard on actors, having to remember, like, how they're supposed to act on that specific day, like certain supporting characters, like, oh, I'm supposed to believe her, and I'm not supposed to believe her, and then I'm supposed to believe her, and then I'm supposed to think she's crazy. That's what makes this so impressive to me. That's a big part of it. Because Sandra Bullock goes from crying because she just found out her husband's dead to being in distress because he's still alive and she doesn't know when he's going to die exactly, to not wanting to go to the funeral, and then, like, and then to optimism of her trying to stop his death, and it really hits hard. Yes, Sandra Bullock does have her moments of either overacting or certain line readings that don't work fully, but she makes up for it with the other scenes. Julian McMahon as Jim Hansen, he does a good job, or decent at least. He was on the show Nip Tuck, which I've never seen. I know a lot of people like that show, but I think he did a good job playing the husband. Excuse me. It's his role, he doesn't really do a ton, but it kind of makes sense in the context of the film. Nia Long as Annie. This is Linda's best friend, whom she talks to, like, every day. She's kind of there to be like, do you know what you're saying? Do you know how crazy you sound? She's kind of just there to serve the specific purpose, so I'm not really mad or anything. Kate Nelligan as Joanne. Yeah, this is the mother. I don't remember if they ever made it clear if it was Linda's mother or Jim's mother, because he just says, I'll call mom. So, and I've heard couples, like, call their mother mom, or their wife or husband's mother mom. But she does a good job. She works in both the scenes where she thinks Annie's crazy and the scenes where she thinks where she's trying to comfort her. Amber Valletta as Claire. I don't want to spoil. I'm not gonna spoil what her character is yet. I'm going to have a spoiler section so that I can get really deep into the film and what it means and everything. But she did a decent enough job. And Peter Stormare, he's in a couple scenes. He's fine, as a doctor. But yeah, this film, it definitely hits a lot of really big emotions in me. It's really unsettling. It constantly um, catches me off guard. Um, i I'm trying to think of ways to talk about it without really like getting too, you know, I'm trying not to give away anything because I'm afraid I'll say something that gives something away. But this film is, even though Premonition from 2004, the Japanese film that I think was direct to video, even though they are not related, they do have very similar premises, like saving people from their future demise and all that. And I do think this film did that way better. I think the fact that it focuses on only one person instead of multiple people like Premonition from 2004 did, I feel like you can get to learn about the characters more. It makes more sense. Because Premonition 2004 didn't really make a lot of sense in many places, like how the people were dead. Because in Premonition 2004, you'd get like a character that you can't tell if it's a ghost or if it's the actual person who hasn't died yet. So it comes off so much like, oh, what's the point of this? Because you know that you can't save them. So I'm glad this film tried to make the distinction with that. Um, I will say in the special features, I saw the deleted scenes in the making of. The making of I wish had a bit more to say about it. That's why I got the Blu-ray, and it'll be in my next haul, which I'll try to do tonight and upload. But yeah, the film, it can be a tough watch. If you've had that trauma in your life, if you've lost a loved one, in one of the worst ways you possibly can, which is when they're ripped away from you like that, um, and you can't do anything about it, you just feel hopeless, like I did. Um, this film will probably very much touch your heart. Um, it can be tough to watch. That's what I'm trying to say. I'll get to the pros and cons. The acting from pretty much everybody is great. Um, the film looks very nice. Who is the cinematographer? Yeah, Torsten Lipstock. Apparently, he works with Menenyapo. He worked with Menenyapo on his German language film Soundless, which I am curious about. I'll put that on my watch list. I'd like to see this director again too. Very very nice direction. Very cool ways of transitioning scenes. There's a scene with her sleeping, and you see like the camera move, and then as it like turns on her head, you see it slowly go from darkness to light, and her clothes slowly change, showing that it's a different day that she's gone to in the repeating cycle. Very well done. Um, Even the couple scenes of CGI that needed to be used for a character crashing into a glass door didn't really like take me out of it, because I understand why it needed to be there and why they couldn't do it for real. I can see it given who the character was. Um, the the way the film ends, and I'll get more into that in the spoiler section. The way the film ends, I can see some people feeling unsatisfied with it. I can definitely see that. But I can also 100% for me see why it works, given the context of the film and given what has happened and given the emotional resonance of everything. I can see why. Um, I think the score from Klaus Badelt, I'm trying to think of other scores he's done, but I thought it worked very well. There are a couple scenes where, oh, excuse me. There are a couple scenes where it gets a bit overblown or overdone, but for the most part, I didn't mind it, I thought it was good. Cons, I only have a couple. The biggest cons I can think of are, um, oh wait, one more pro. The child actors. Um, Let me find their names because they're not listed on the back. Courtney Taylor and Cheyenne McClure as Bridget and Megan Hansen, respectively. They didn't do a bad job. I thought they worked fine. They weren't annoying, so it worked. And it's good because they're very major characters. Cons, I would say during intense sequences, there are some weird editing things. Like, you'll see Sandra Bullock's character running and the camera is like flickering a bit. I found that a weird choice, and during the scene at the funeral and the scene with the institution, it's very shaky cam, and I feel like part of that was because the film is PG-13, which that's not a big issue for most of the film. I just think it's a bit of an issue for that, given the context of what happened in the scene, having to shoot around it, most likely to keep it a PG-13 because they weren't trying to get an R. I can understand that. It didn't take me out of it. I just felt it was a very weird choice. And also, I'm not a fan of Peter Stormare's character, really. I feel like he was a bit cliche with how he was written. But other than that, I think this is a very effective, very it's thrilling. It is thrilling, but it also makes you feel like shit, this movie. I usually am against movies that are like that, but this film isn't like all depressing. It has moments that I really like. It has moments that made me smile, made me laugh. It has things to level out the depressing parts, which most like dramas that get huge amazing reviews usually never have. So that I'm glad that this film didn't go down that same route. But yeah, final thoughts before I get to the spoilers. Do watch this film. I'm pretty sure it's still on Netflix. If it isn't, I'll try to write something in the description to say where you can watch it, because I have the Blu-ray, and it's an older Blu-ray. It's a Blu-ray from 2007, so like early Blu-ray. But yeah, I do recommend this Blu-ray. Very great picture quality, interesting special features. I haven't gotten to Real Premonitions yet, but that one did look interesting. But yeah, now that I have now that I'm there, I will be going into spoilers. So, spoilers for Premonition. If you haven't left now and you still want to see it, leave now and come back to it this review after you've seen it. Now, the way the film ends, that people online have said, like, oh, it goes nowhere with this ending. I completely disagree, because there's the theory of time travel and the whole existential question of if you could go back in time, would you change, and you tried to change things, would you actually change anything? And there's the whole fear of if you change something, something worse could happen, such as, like, I hate to go in this direction, but people are like, oh, you could have stopped Hitler. You could have killed Hitler back when he was a baby. Like, I know it's a Ben Shapiro thing, but I'm being serious. If you had Hitler as a baby, would you kill him? I, myself, say no to that question because I'm afraid of what worse could happen. Like, what if Hitler wasn't alive and someone worse, like, was alive and did even worse things than killing millions of Jews? That is what I feel with this film. And the ending, what happens in the ending is Amber Valletta's character was the assistant manager of the nationwide branch um, that Sandra Bullock's character, Linda, her husband works for. And it turns out that he was going to have an affair with her. And as he's calling her, as he's calling Amber Valletta's character, Claire, Claire, he says, I can't do this. My wife and kids mean too much to me. And then he leaves the message from the beginning of the film on the answering machine at their house, saying that he means what he said last night. He loves the kids. He loves her. And then she calls him and says, I know about Claire. It's okay. I understand. And he said he wasn't going to do it, which we now know he wasn't going to. He tries to turn around in the street at the mile 220 marker, and he basically still gets killed in the accident that he was originally supposed to be. And the, like, tanker that hits his car and apparently decapitates him. I guess that's what they meant, because his head does fall out of the casket at the funeral home, which, yes, I do think that scene's a bit much. It is. I don't think it needed to be in the film. You could have just had a bit of his body fall out or something, but I think the beheaded thing was a bit too much. But, and then Linda basically realizes she couldn't change it, and I feel like that's a satisfactory ending. I know a lot of people don't like the ending. I know a lot of people think this is a garbage film. I completely disagree, obviously. If you hate the film, more power to you. If you're only hating on it just to hate on it because you saw it had like a 7% on Rotten Tomatoes, first off, Rotten Tomatoes is bullshit because they can choose whatever reviews pop up on their site. And two, that's not right. You're entitled to your own opinion. You're not entitled to pretending you watched the movie or pretending that's your actual opinion. Because this director very much could have not worked anymore because of the horrible reviews it got, and if a lot of the horrible reviews were fake, then it's your fault. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just very opinionated. But yeah, and then the film ends with Linda and her daughters moving out of the house that her and her husband lived in all that time, and you see that she is pregnant. With the loss of one life, you have a new life. And I thought that was a nice ending. The alternate ending, I was not a fan of. It's basically the same ending, but instead you hear like the shower turn on, which happened earlier in the film, which showed Linda that her husband was alive in the time loop. After the second day, she came back and he was alive. And then she opens up the shower curtains and then it cuts to black. I really didn't like that ending. I think it leaves it too open-ended, and I mean, I'm not a fan of open endings like that because they kind of feel forced, and apparently the director felt the same way. But yeah, in conclusion, I just really love this film. I know a lot of people yeah, a lot of people hate it. I don't really understand why. Even friends of mine that have seen it were like, "Yeah, it's okay," and I'm fine with an okay. I'm fine with not people not liking it. But most people on Letterboxd who say they don't like it, they're like, "Oh, I had a premonition I wouldn't that this movie would suck. Looks like I was right." Like they're not explaining anything about why they didn't like it. They're just saying they didn't like it, and it feels like they're chasing a trend, like everything nowadays. It's like every Asian movie that everybody likes nowadays. It just feels like people like it because it's a trend, but whatever. In conclusion, I do say, watch the film, watch it wherever you can find it. Apparently, I guess it's not on Netflix anymore. Oh. Well, apparently you can rent it on Amazon. But yeah, I I do 100% recommend that you watch it. Um, if you like the video, uh, comment below, like the video, uh, tell me how I did, and movie review next door, out.